Thank you, Tyler, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for attending this meeting. It's a really pleasure and an honor to have you here. As Tyler mentioned, we're going to start this symposium. We organize this symposium going to the concepts, to the facts. Before to initiate my presentation, I want to say thank you to the team that worked with me in order to develop this concept. And those people are Dr. Eduardo Fano, Dr. Enrique Mondaca, Dr. Brian Payne, and they collaborate with me. Then let's see about the infection chain concept. What is about this? And we are talking about concepts, and and it's something that I found that is really challenging I'm a veterinarian, and it's really challenging for a veterinarian mind, because we are usually thinking in facts. And when we are going to talk about concepts, it's really, really hard for us to digest what is a concept. Then because I know that it's challenging for us, based in our formation, I went to the dictionary and have a definition of concept. Then concept coming from the Latin conceptus, that means to conceive. To conceive what? A plan or an intention, an idea or invention to help sell or publicize a commodity. That is the definition from the Oxford Dictionary. Also, Macmillan Dictionary says that a concept is an idea or something new or something that exists. That is the definition of concept. During my presentation, I'm going to talk about the origin of this concept. What is the infection chain concept? I'm going to focus in disease prevention, that I think is something that we need to do as veterinarians. And I'm going to talk about several links for achieve this prevention. Well, let's talk about the origin of the concept. And the origin of the concept is coming from swine production health challenges. As Tyler mentioned, I have been working in the U.S. swine industry since 2006, but I continue traveling around the world, essentially in the Americas and into Spain. And believe me, guys, that everybody in the Americas, from, I think, Canada until Chile, has the same challenges. And the main challenges that we have is control health. We continue having questions about how is the best way to control the infection for mycoplasma or the effects of mycoplasma infections. We continue having questions about the epidemiology of the disease and how control that and how match that with the control of the disease, the same with PIRS and the same with circovirus. For example, in circovirus, we have a great debate about what is the impact of viremia in the south and what is the impact of this viremia in the south until the pigs. Then all these challenges all these challenges has an impact in the swine industry. One of the things that with my team we realized is that as an industry, we are over-focused in this guy, the piglet. And we want to resolve all the health issues just focusing to the piglet. And sometimes we vaccinate 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 times this guy in order to resolve problems that maybe are not caused, or maybe this guy is not having the responsibility of those problems. Then why don't we change the piglet approach to a system approach? Why don't, instead to continue focus the vaccination of the piglet at 3 weeks of age, we think broader, and we go and think about gilt introduction and gilt stabilization of the reproductive hairs, acclimatization of the gilts, and then prevention into the piglet. Maybe we need to change to a system approach. Then we need to have a multi-level approach. And our idea, or the idea of this concept, is go to the root of the problem. Where is the real root of the problem? Where is it located, and how we can fix it? How we can fix it in order to have more healthy pigs and more productive pigs. Then that was the reason why we think about the chain thinking. And why we start thinking about the chain concept. And the origin of this concept coming because we evaluate or review about the chain of infection in the epidemiology field, looking at an individual approach. And when we are looking in an individual approach, we see that we have a portal of entry, we have a susceptible host, then we need to have an infectious agent, some reservoirs for this infectious agent, and we need to have a portal of exit of this infection agent. Then we need to have different means of transmission, and it's a continuous change with different links when we evaluate the infection chain in an individual approach. But also, when we review how we are producing peaks, and this is a really simple and really basic graph, how we produce peaks. We produce peaks in a way of a continuous process, I mean, as a chain. Nothing new for you guys. I'm not discovering the wheel with my presentation here. But you know that we have the introduction of new gills and bores. We have the breeding house. From the breeding house, we have cooling of sows or bores. Then we have pregnant sows that go to the gestation house, go to the farrowing room. Then we have weaned pigs. These pigs go rearing or go to the fattening and now put to the market. Sometimes from these pigs we took some gills that is going to be introduced again to the breeding house. The same for the old sows. After the farrow, they're going to come back to be part of the breeding house. But if you see, it's a production chain. It's a cycle. It's a production chain. Then if we have a production chain, in parallel, as you can see here, we have production chain, the multiplier, the GDU, the sow herd, the nursery, and the finishing. And in parallel, we have an infection chain that is impacting each different level of the production chain. What is really interesting is that even when we know that we are producing pigs in a systematic or in a chain, under a chain concept, when we talk about prevention, we approach the prevention of those piglets or those populations in a multi-stage and in an independent way. We have an approach to prevent the gills in an independent way, the sows, the piglets, and the growing and finishing. Then my question is, why if we have a production chain, we don't have a prevention chain approach in which we can link gills, sows, piglets, and growing and finishing? Sounds really simple. Again, I'm not discovering the wheel with this presentation, but we are not doing that. Looks like that instead to create a really solid and safety bridge for the construction and the prevention of diseases, we prefer continuously use shortcuts that put in risk our population. And it's something that we need to consider every time. If we don't approach the prevention of the diseases in a comprehensive way, our populations are in a continuous risk like these guys. Let's talk about the consolidation of the concept of the infection chain. The chain thinking in swine health is not a new thinking. It's something really interesting. I'm not a young guy now, but the concept is older than I. Because the first paper that talked about this concept was published in 1965 by Dr. Goodwin. Dr. Goodwin, in a paper that was named, The Phenomenon of Suppressed Respiratory Disease in the Litter of Older Sows, he found that older sows in a farm, the pigs that come in from older sows in a farm don't develop respiratory symptoms in comparison those from the pigs from young sows in the farm. Then he put those observations and he says, hey, something happens with the immunity of the sows. When the sows become older, pass more immunity to the piglets, and those pigs don't develop respiratory disease. Of course, I completely agree with you. We are talking in those years about Pasteurella and those kind of pathogens, but the concept is there. After that, nothing was published until 1980, when Tom Alexander coming with this paper, medicated early weaning to obtain pigs free from pathogens endemic in the herd of origin. I'm going to review more in detail this specific paper. But this specific paper was something that impacted the way that we are producing pigs right now and the way that we are preventing disease right now since 1980. After that, we have Kirk Clark and Alan Shade. Alan is around here. In 1999, that they published a paper named The Effect of All-in-all-out Management on Pigs from Herd with Exotic Pneumonia, with the same concept. I mean, if I manage populations in a different way and coming from different sow status, I can prevent diseases just with that management. After that, same, Dr. Kirk Clark with Tom Feynman as a co-author published another paper that was named An Evaluation of the Components of the Mu in Swine Health Reproduction. And the concept was the same. I mean, segregate different populations and have an impact in the immunity in those different chains or links of the production chain. In 1996, after we were start hitting with the Pierce disease, Dr. Scott D. published the Porcine Respiratory Disease Complex, Are Subpopulations Important? And if you review the paper is about the same concept. I mean, what is the impact of the Pierce virus in different segments of the population? In 2000, Dr. Harris published a book named Multi-Site Pig Production, in which he referred to these concepts again. In 2005, Dr. Carlos Pilluan published a paper in the Lehman Conference named A Controversial View of Mycoplasma Pneumonia Epidemiology, in which he focused about this concept again. And finally, in 2007, that looks like it's since 2007, nobody again is taking this concept in the way that I am describing. Dr. Eduardo Fano and Carlos Pilluan published another paper named New Information on the Epidemiology of Mycoplasma Pneumonia. Let's go back to the paper of Tom Alexander. Something wrong in the slide, but anyway, I'm going to try to describe for you. Tom Alexander says that the objective of his publication was, in the sow, maximizing sow immunity, minimizing sow excretion. Also minimizing the colonization of the pig, using different intervention methods. For example, for the maximizing sow immunity, minimizing sow excretion, he talked about sow vaccination and sow medication. It was really funny because in the paper he talked about vaccinate the sow. But as an industry, we only took the part of the medication of the sow. Minimizing colonization, we can do it with different ways. One, using an early weaning or, well, piglet medication. Then what is going to be the epidemiological effect of these different intervention methodologies? Minimizing the vertical transmission, minimizing the horizontal transmission. And then we're going to have healthy pigs at the end. Then that was described in 1980. Oh, well. In 2007, this is the PhD thesis of Dr. Eduardo Fano, he described the order of the epidemiological events of Mycoplasma pneumonia infection. He said in his thesis that in order to have a really nice control of the Mycoplasma infection, we need to focus in the incoming gill status, work in the sow-herd infection pressure, focus in vertical transmission, reduce the prevalence at weaning, avoid the nursery piglets exposure, and finally, then, controlling the finishing pigs disease. And again, that was made in 2007. We can summarize Dr. Fano's paper in this chart. In this chart, Dr. Fano says we have 3 different levels of intervention. One is the replacement animals, second is the sow herd, and third is the wean to finish pigs. We have horizontal transmission from the level 1 to the level 2, and we have vertical transmission from the level 2 to the level 3. Also, in all the 3 levels, we have lateral spread of the pathogen. That applies for Mycoplasma, but applies also for other diseases as PIRS or circovirus or influenza. Also, we need to consider in this equation the local replacement. I mean, the introduction of external gills or negative or positive gills. I will try to visualize and explain the infection chain concept more in detail. In the past, some slides ago, I was talking about the infection chain in an individual way. Now, I'm going to describe what's happening with the infection chain with swine pathogens in one population or in one system. We have the gill development process is linked with the gill to sow or sow to sow transmission. I mean, sow herd infection dynamics, sow to piglet transmission, piglet to piglet transmission in the nursery or in the finishing, early or late colonization, and the agent is spread in the nursery of the finishing. And again, it's a continuous process and it's a chain with different links. That is what is happening every day in our farms. Then, when we have a sow to piglet vertical transmission, the effect is that we're going to have later horizontal transmission among the piglet population pre and post weaning, and we're going to have a first stage of piglet colonization and associated to the disease and downstream. What's happened before and after vertical transmission? Just few links in order to put an example. If we have sow herd instability and high infection pressure, what we need to do is working, as Tom Alexander mentioned, and also Reed Phillips in the last years mentioned and remind us this for the control of PIRS, minimizing the infection pressure and maximizing the immunity. Then, in order to control the vertical transmission, because it's something that is going to happen, we need to minimize in the vertical transmission rate, delaying the early colonization, and maximizing the maternal immunity. And finally, the result of all these, again, change of all these different links is that we're going to have horizontal transmission, pre and post-weaning, first stage of piglets colonization, and associated disease to downstream. Then, in order to resolve and fix this, we need to generate vaccination programs prior to the colonization and reduction on horizontal transmission rate. And we can create different charts or different schemes or infection change depending different production systems, like this, or wherever that we can have, and depending of our production system. What is important is understand that we have a vertical transmission and an horizontal transmission at the end. And this is packed in only one event that is named infection change. What we do frequently? We observe frequently in the field finishing exposure and clinical disease. And this finishing exposure and clinical disease usually cause problems in the performance of the pigs. And how are we trying to fix this? Again, vaccinating the pigs pre-weaning or in the nursery, during this period. And we are putting all the time, all our efforts to control the diseases just doing that. But why we are not more creative? And why don't we try to mimic with the infection change and go to work before of that or behind of that? Because if we are more proactive, we need to work in the introduction of negative gills, in the acclimatization of those negative gills, or well, if we are going to introduce positive shedding gills in order to reduce the sow herd infection pressure and reduce the vertical transmission from these infected sows to the piglets. Then, as you see, it's not simple. It's not as simple as just vaccinate a pig. Then, again, our focus needs to be the gills, naives, and seeders. After that, the sow herd, reducing the pre-weaning exposure, and after that, we're going to have a prevention of the post-weaning exposure, and in the finishing area, we're going to have early disease and delayed disease. If we can do that, we're going to have a more intensity of prevention in these first segments of the production change, and that is going to create the use of less treatments in the finishing areas. Someone can ask me, with this concept, we're going to eradicate diseases? And my answer is no. And my answer is no, because the major part, for don't say all the vaccines that we have right now, that we are using right now, they don't prevent the infection. Anyway, we're going to have the infection. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, that infection is going to be reflected in the finishing area. Then we need to go for necessarily to vaccinate and reinforce the immunity to the piglet. This is one example. And in this example, it was a problem with the slides. With this example, we have two different columns. In this column, we have the infection chain process. We have the introduction of gills between 21 to 100 days old. Then we have onset, severity, and duration of the infection and excretion status. After that, we have the development of those gills between the 100 to 200 days. We need to consider if those gills are naive, if they are shedding, if they are recovered, and the acclimatization method that we are using. We also need to take care about the gill introduction to the reproductive herd. And we need to have a clear objective, what is going to be the final status. Negative, positive, naive, or sheeder, promoting sow herd instability. What we are looking, what is our objective? And we need to define this chart for each one of the diseases that we're going to face. Also, we need to talk about or focus about gills P1 and P2 interaction, because we're going to, and we know that we're going to have horizontal transmission of pathogens or of different pathogens between these populations. That is going to be reflected in sow herd infection pressure, having as an effect shedding, exposure, immunity, etc. And finally, we're going to have vertical transmission. And if you see, vertical transmission is just a minor component of this whole infection chain complex. Because in this vertical transmission, the sow is going to shedding the status, sow immunity status at an exposure level. And it's going to cause piglet colonization, different exposure level, and it's going to affect the piglet immune status. At the end, the agent spread is going to be spread in the nursery and finishing and causing clinical symptoms. Then this is the infection change. Then in parallel, we need to create a prevention chain. A prevention chain in which not only with immunization, but also with with management intervention processes, reduce the impact of the infection change to the piglet, and at the end, focus at the end in the piglet immunization. If we don't do the control of the diseases in this way, it's like if we have the piglet fighting with everybody alone. And it's not fair. We need to help him. Then, I go back to the concept. We have a production chain. Then we need to understand that because this production chain, we're going to have an infection chain, and we need to create in parallel a prevention chain. And then we need to have a chain thinking. Everything in production, in swine production, is linked. And we need to understand that. Production chain, infection chain, prevention chain. And honestly, guys, this is not new. This is not new. This slide that I have here is something that we are recommending for years and years, maybe 16 years, for the control of peers. And what Reed Phillips always says, if you want to control peers, you need to do this. In the breeding herd, load, close, and homogenize the breeding herd, introduce replacement gills or vaccinate replacement gills with 2 doses of MLB 30 days apart, and completed at least 28 days prior to the entry to the breeding herd. Then we are focused to the gills. Also, we are focused to the reproductive herd, because we are saying you need to vaccinate the breeding herd 2 times 30 days apart. And you need to keep a maintenance of with quarterly mass vaccination. But also, in our recommendation, we said, in our general recommendation, you need to vaccinate the growing pigs. Initiate mass vaccination of growing pigs, flow 2 times 30 days apart, and have a maintenance vaccination of piglets at weaning or post-entry to the nursery. And all this plus a strategic pig flow management. Then, it's a comprehensive approach for the control of the disease. In summary, and I don't want to be repetitive, production chain, infection chain, prevention chain, and then we need to have a full program approach, or a comprehensive program approach. And this is one example, really schematic, as a summary of my presentation. If you want to control pears, mycoplasma, circovirus, influenza, Lawsonia, you need to focus in the first step to the gilt, second step to the sow, and finally to the piglet, with the same importance or the same relevance. Of course, you need to have a support of diagnostics and continuous evaluation of performance data. It's really interesting, and it's something that I discuss and learn from Dr. Dale Paulson. Usually we have a columnar approach of the control of the diseases. I mean, we think about control of the diseases in terms of the use of one vaccine for control pears, one vaccine for control circovirus, one vaccine for control mycoplasma, and one vaccine for control swine influenza. When in reality, in the field, we are having all these problems together, impacting the same pig or the same population together, or in a different points of the infection chain of the production chain, but together. All these pathogens are linked also. And in the same way, we try to fix the problem thinking about Pierce vaccine, PCV2 vaccine, mycoplasma vaccine, swine influenza vaccine, instead to think in the production chain and in the infection chain. It's really interesting. I always said that to the customers that I visit in the Americas. When I walk in a barn and I listen that one pig is coughing, I'm not thinking in terms of this pig needs mycoplasma vaccine, or these pigs need influenza vaccine. I think in terms of respiratory complex. And I think that I need to do something in the gills and in the sows to control the problem that I am observing in the finishing. Another important thing is expectation about prevention, because prevention is about produce healthy pigs that, because they're going to be healthy, are going to generate better performance. But sometimes we use the vaccines as a growth promoters. Then the other day I took randomly from one of the congresses that we have different publications, not necessarily for the BI group, from the BI group and other groups. And I found this. Circovirus vaccination generates 7 pounds more. Mycoplasma vaccination, 4 pounds more. Pierce vaccination, 3 pounds more. And Lawsonia vaccination, 6 pounds more. 6 pounds more. At the total, I have 20 pounds. Maybe in the future, if I continue putting vaccine, I don't need to feed the pigs. Just put vaccines. That is not realistic. Then, we need to think not out in the box. In this case, we need to think in the box. And we need to understand what is the process, and we need to fix it from the root cause.